everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander, and I am, as always, honored and excited to get to host another Power to Fly Chat and Learn virtual event. Now, before we get going, I just want to welcome everyone and head over into some quick housekeeping items. This will be especially important if maybe today is your first event with Power to Fly. And if that's the case, then hi, welcome. We're so happy to meet you. Now, the love is no less real for my frequent flyers. Thank you so much for all those familiar names and faces in the chat. I always love seeing all of our frequent flyers here in our events as well. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Now, the big thing to know, whether this is your first Power to Fly event or your 100th, is participation. These events are all about you. They're about our audience members and making sure that you all get the value that you came to get from today's event. So you can do that in a couple different ways. You are welcome to participate with your cameras if you'd like. Feel free to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. Hi, everybody. I see we've got a bunch of people starting to chime in. Loving to see all the representation there. So yeah, please feel free to turn your cameras on if you'd like. There is no pressure to be Instagram perfect, y'all. Truly, we don't care if you are coming to us from a corner office or your living room couch. You can be in a three-piece suit or your bathrobe. I don't care. We just want to meet you where you are. Now, if you want to join in, but you don't want to do so with your camera, that's fine. You can always join in the chat as well. Feel free to add questions or comments as we go. Feel free to network with your fellow attendees today, as well as interact with our speakers. Just make sure that as we do that, we are, as always, leading from a place of kindness and respect. Now, I am really eager to see how far our virtual audience spreads. So if y'all would like to, please feel free to jump in that chat and let us know where you're joining from. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. This is land that once belonged to the Fox, Kickapoo, and Potawatomi tribes in my area. So if you'd like to, please feel free to let us know where you're joining us from, or if you know whose land you're on. Ooh, Columbus, Ohio, not that far down the road from me. Thanks so much, y'all. Texas, we've got Charleston, South Carolina, Maryland, San Diego, California, New York City, Dallas, Texas, Denver, West Palm Beach, y'all coming in from all over today. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, as you're chiming in that chat thread, if you have questions while we go, ask questions in the chat thread. If you asked a question at registration and you're not sure if we're going to get to it, ask it in the chat thread. If you asked a question and you want to make sure that we have all the details, the context that we need, let us know. Keep that chat thread hopping, people. I really want to see everybody making full use of that today. Now, the big thing to know about all of our virtual events, especially today, is that this session is being recorded. So what that means for you is you don't have to take notes. You get to sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversations that I'm about to have with Kristen and Aliyah. Now, we are recording, so what that means is in about 4 to 5 business days, you will all get an email from Power to Fly with a link to where you can rewatch this recording when it gets posted on our website. Now, I absolutely recommend that you check out our website. There's a huge archive. Everything that's happened from the beginning of Chat and Learns through now is on there. But let's say that you maybe don't want to wait 4 to 5 business days. Let's say that Aliyah or Kristen says something today so like mind-blowing, paradigm shifting, you just cannot wait to tell a friend or a coworker or a relative. You don't have to. I'll share links for this in the chat thread as we go, but you can always head over to our YouTube channel. We're broadcasting live to YouTube right now. Hi, YouTube, as well as our website. And if you want to check out the recording of this session, it'll be posted usually within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of the live stream. So you can always check it out. The recording will be posted there later today, and you can send out that link to wherever you'd like as well if you want to share some of the amazing knowledge that we're about to share with you from both Kristen and Aliyah. Now, like I said, please feel free to ask questions or add comments in the chat thread. I'll be in there and hopefully be able to make sure that we all get the most out of today's event. Now, before I introduce you to our speakers, I do just want to highlight they are here today on behalf of Samsara, a fabulous partner with Power to Fly. Actually, y'all have been partners with us for at least the last 4 years because I used to work on lists for all of you when I was part of our talent team. So very excited to continue the partnership with Samsara and really excited to get to introduce you to their 2 amazing reps today. So first, we're going to be introducing you to Kristen Kathan. Now, Kristen is Samsara's Director of Inside Sales. Now, while Kristen has been with Samsara for 6 years, her background in sales has been plentiful before that. She received her bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley, where she also served as team captain on the women's volleyball squad. She started her career in sports marketing and transitioned to tech, where she fell in love with a fast-paced and competitive environment. Now, over the past 10 years, Kristen has worked at several tech startups in San Fran and has navigated 7 promotions in that time. Kristen has built and managed teams from the ground up, successfully mentored new and veteran managers, and has instilled high-performing cultures across her teams. Kristen, we are so happy to have you join the stage today. Is there anything else you want our audience members to know about you?
Well, thank you, Meg. I'm really excited to be here and so excited to do this with Aliyah as well. She's incredible. I think, the only other thing as you're reading my professional career is that part of my personal jobs that I'm also a mother of a 1.5-year-old. So that's my real full-time job. But I guess Samsara is what I do on the side when he lets me have some time to work. So yeah.
When your tiny supervisor is not, dictating your every move. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kristen. Thanks for joining us. Now, joining Kristen on stage is going to be her coworker, Aliyah Morphis. Now, Aliyah is a sales manager at Samsara. She built her career in tech and media sales at industry-leading companies like HubSpot and LinkedIn, where she had the opportunity to consult a variety of businesses on their fundraising, go-to-market, and operations strategies. Now, Aliyah is a DEI advocate, passionate about making access to jobs more equitable for under-resourced communities and people of color. To influence DEI initiatives at Samsara, Aliyah sits on the company's DEI steering committee and on the leadership team for Black Sara, Samsara's employee resource group devoted to supporting Black employees and allies. Aliyah, welcome to the stage. We're so happy to have you. What else should our audience know about you today?
Thanks, May. I'm also very excited to be here sitting alongside Kristen. I'll just share one personal thing as well. I just celebrated my wedding this past summer, so still enjoying the newlywed life.
Congratulations. I always love an opportunity to celebrate somebody's life choices. So I love the ones that come with ceremonies and the ones that don't. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. All right, y'all, let's get going. We're going to dive into your questions today. Now, like I said, we are going to go over the questions that y'all asked at registration. If you have additional questions that you want to share, please feel free. I'll have my eyes on the chat as we go. If we are going over one of your questions and you think there's some more detail that we should know, let us know. Send it in the chat. I am absolutely happy to make sure that we hear from as many people as possible today. And don't forget, y'all, you all took time out of your day to be here with us and, be here live while we do this, in front of y'all. So thank you. Obviously, we love people that come up and show up for an event, but also, we really want to make sure that you get the value you came to get from today's event. So if you have questions, ask them. I want to make sure that the time that you spend with Power to Fly and amazing companies like Samsara is worth it. So if you got questions, bring them. All right, our first question here. There were a lot of people that had questions about what a transition looks like. As we're talking about navigating leadership as a sales professional, there's a lot of things that could mean to people. So Aliyah, let's start with you. Could you share a brief overview of what your transitioning from an individual contributor meant, as you moved throughout your career or career thus far, I should say?
Yeah, definitely. So I initially was at LinkedIn where I had been selling for quite some time and decided that I wanted to build my skill set wide before going up. So took a quick pivot into partnerships and was exposed to a variety of different work streams, tools, and industry leaders in that sense. And after continuing to build my foundation wide, realized that it was time for me to begin building up. And what it really came down to was understanding what was filling my cup throughout the day. And I realized that I was taking so much pride and getting so much fulfillment from onboarding teammates, building new resources for people, collaborating. And so I realized through conversations with mentors, as I was able to express my thoughts and put them down on paper as well, that I was ready rather to make that pivot. And so I began, of course, continuing to understand what it would look like going from team lead roles to more of a official manager role. And so did quite a bit of shadowing with mentors and also took on more responsibilities so that when placed in management role would be able to really facilitate from beginning to end the coaching piece as well as the strategic thinking that's required. So for me, once I actually got in the role, I was fortunate enough to have a ramp period where I was able to set aside time solely to planning what I wanted team meetings to look like for my first quarter, how I wanted to get to know each of my reps. And as I began to grow my team, I started with a team of 6, now have a team of 10. I began to implement some things that may seem trivial, like get to know me surveys that really allow me to dive in deep with my reps, but also establish my structure that is rinse and repeat. So my team knows what to expect from me. They understand what our team culture is, what the team expectations are, from the smaller things like the hours that you should be logging on to really the quality of work and the collaboration and interaction that is expected of everyone on the team. So overall, it took a lot of iterating to get to where I am now, but really started with research and then creating a path that I was able to continue to refine, and still refine to this day.
I mean, I'm sitting here just gobsmacked at the idea that people actually like think about what they want to do with their careers. And yes, I realize how ridiculous this is given like what I do for my job. I completely understand. However, like just the intentionality and like the global approach to it, like these are people who have their lives together is what I'm saying. Like really. So I think this is really, really awesome. And it very much highlights kind of how much preparation can be needed for this, because this is a huge change, right? This is a massive shift. And in a lot of ways, it can feel like you're kind of by yourself through it. So it is really nice that, you had the drive and you kind of knew, like you said, you wanted to go broad with your knowledge base before building up. But it is really nice that once you decided to make that shift, you were supported by Samsara. Kristen, I want to talk to you about this too. What does this look like for you? What was your path like from individual contributor into moving into leadership?
Yeah, and my path has been a little different too, because my first almost 4 years professionally wasn't in tech. So it was in sports marketing, very different world, very different day to day, wasn't in sales. So when I did transition into tech, I started as an ADR or SDR, got to move up to an AE, did well there, and then got the opportunity to manage a team of AEs and have kind of gone up from there. But when I think back to that point of transition or that journey, if you will, I think back to the first 2 years at that company as an ADR and as an AE, and sort of what opened those doors for me, or what allowed for those doors to open. And, I come from an athletic background. So the things that, athletes tend to tell themselves is control the controllables. And, one of those controllables is work ethic. And so when I entered this world of tech, and I thought, okay, well, work ethic is what I control. So I don't know much about tech and I don't know much about anything yet, but what I do know is that I can control what I do every single day. And so I remember getting, company targets, like make 100 calls a week. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try 200. Well, let's see if that's possible. If they ask me to schedule 5 calls a week, I'm going to try to schedule 10. And I took that mentality and brought that into my role as an account executive. What I was so hyper-focused on in those first couple of years in this new industry was, I want to be able to establish credibility. I want to establish a brand for myself. And so I felt like by doing these things and just trying so hard and pushing the limits and the ceilings, maybe that'll open doors for me. And so naturally what ended up happening is, when you set really high targets and, you're getting great coaching, you can overachieve, people start to take notice, right? And I ended up being put in a position where leaders were asking me to run trainings and be involved in onboarding and asking for my thoughts on some business level impact questions. And so when I think of the point of transitioning into that leadership role, I was actually, and I interviewed for the role, I was doing a lot of the things in my previous role before I even stepped into the leadership role. And reflecting on it now, I think a leadership role or a manager title or a director title, that's all it really is, right? It's just a title. It does everybody. I can think of so many people at Samsara that are leading today that don't have that title, but it's how you show up. It's how you make a group of people feel. It's how you're leading by example every single day. And so, when I think of that journey and I think of, anybody else trying to make that journey, I think that's really important to, and how I tackled it was just controlling what you can control, and don't wait to do the job you want for when the job's available for you. Do it now, and then go campaign yourself for that.
I very much appreciate this. And it's kind of very funny. I mean, like I've got family members who came through in sports marketing and management, and it's completely a different world. It really, really is. But I think it also kind of highlights the fact that not necessarily just because you can manage in one area does not mean you can manage anywhere, but developing good core management skills is not that common, which is shocking, but it's, you know, it's just not. But developing those good core skills means that you can take those from industry to industry. And so I think it is really interesting that as somebody who knew that they weren't going to not necessarily be behind the eight ball, but didn't have the kind of years in the trenches that some of the other people in your industry already did, I think it is really important to be intentional with it. You know, like Aliyah said, think what long-term, what you want to be actually accomplishing, and then what do you need to have in your skill case to be able to execute these things. Yeah. And I'm loving the fact that your two journeys were different from each other, because I do think that it is something important that we highlight, that just because somebody has maybe a non-traditional career path, the non-traditional ones don't all look the same either. It's not just one of those like, oh, it doesn't look like this, so it's probably that. So I very much appreciate us kind of covering the gamut here. What do you think was really the inspiration for your transition into sales leadership? Like, what do you think kind of sparked your interest or made you want to do this? And then following that, what was one of the biggest challenges along that journey for you? Kristen, do you want to start us?
Sure. You know, when I think about like inspiration, you know, what made me want to get into a leadership role in the beginning, I think it really takes rewinding the clock and some looking back on times in my life where I've gotten a lot of the fulfillment. I said it, like filling your cup, right? Giving you that energy. And for me, you know, I feel like I've always found myself in a position of leadership more often than not. I've been captains of my sports teams. I've always been a coach of some sorts, like helping influence different people and mentoring and just helping others. Like I've learned early on, before I was working professionally, that gives me so much energy and makes me such a fulfilled person. So, you know, I think that inspiration really helped. With that being said, I will say when I entered the professional world, I didn't enter it saying, I want to be a people manager and I want, like, this is what I want to do. I just thought, well, I'm just going to try really hard and see what doors open and what's going on in my life at the time. I'm going to see if I want to walk through those doors. And so, you know, it ended up happening for me, which I'm so thankful for. And when I look back, it is pretty in line with what I was doing even before professionally. But with that being said, I had a lot of challenges with the transition. I mean, I really did. And I will say that I'll admit, like, I think I full on failed in my first leadership role. And, you know, when I first stepped in, I was at a bootstrap company at the time. So basically everyone has to wear a lot of hats. Like you got to be comfortable doing a little bit of everything. And so I remember managing a team of account executives. I also was asked to hold a personal quota. And so in doing so, my mentality was kind of split, right? I had this individual contributor mindset when I also had to go manage a group of AEs, which these were also my peers. So going from that peer to manager transition is a very tricky one. So I sort of took my individual contributor mentality and just tried to apply it to management. I was like, all right, here's the plays, X's and O's, slide it across the desk. Let's go do it, everybody. And I really thought at the time, like, that's how this is done. Just like tell people what to do and they'll go do it. And we'll all ride off into the sunset. And I was, shown very quickly that that's not at all what works. And that's not at all what people want in a manager. I've also been described as an intense person once in a while in my life. So when you combine those things with that approach, like, you know, I can only imagine people reporting to me were probably like, yikes, this is not working for her. And so I will say it was the hardest transition of my career, hands down. And although I will fully admit and wave the flag, like full on failure, did not work out, I don't know that there's been another time professionally where I've learned and grown more from it because it was so epically terrible, to be quite honest. So yeah, I think that was definitely a huge challenge for me.
That's literally what I kept hearing in my head every time you were like, yeah, and this wasn't really going that great. And I think I failed. I'm like, cause you learned, huh? Like,
Yeah,
seriously, our brains are not designed to learn from success. They're not. Our brains are hardwired to only learn from failure. And as somebody who has failed, oh, just spectacularly in so many different areas of my life, I'm telling you, that's what you learn from. You learn when it all goes just horribly down in flames.
exactly.
And I mean, yeah, it does sound like a lot, like that's a hard time. That's a lot of lessons to learn. Aliyah, was it similar for you? Was your inspiration to get into management similar, or did you come to it in a different way?
Mine was definitely similar in that it came down to impact. I knew growing up, I grew up in a low income family, one of 6 siblings, lots of eyes on me all the time. And some from the siblings, others from the grandparents who were like, you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer. And at the end of it, I understood they wanted me to create impact. I tell them I'm a corporate doctor at this point, but that's another conversation. Ultimately, what it came down to was being able to help, like Kristen said, and help people advance themselves. For me, it started with community work, mentorship, and then translated into the workplace. And once I realized it can become my full-time job, literally helping others as a manager, I was really excited. It was one of those light bulb moments where it would allow me to not only continue to have positive impact on others, but also help advance a business by being further involved in strategy conversations that you may be looped into as an IC, but don't necessarily get to spearhead an initiative around. So I saw it as really two-pronged, the impact for individuals and also for a business. And then when it came to challenges, I would be lying if I said I don't still experience them. But ultimately, I think it really started with the transition around the IC to managerial mindset that Kristen talked about. But for me, it was around impact. You can have a top performer. Are they a top performer because they're just freaking awesome, or because you're really coaching and nurturing and challenging them to up level? Similarly, you can be spending so much time and being intentional with the content that you're creating and with the one-on-one feedback that you're providing. But if someone's not receptive to it, what does that look like for you? And so in sales, especially as an IC, you work hard, you control your inputs, and more often than not, you're going to see the direct correlation with your results. And so as a leader, it was interesting to see how different reps on my team resonated with different messages, different forms of communication. And naturally, it took learning, not just different processes, but really the people on my team. And I manage a team that is very fast paced. So in the last year, I've promoted 6 people, but I've also unfortunately had to process terminations. So with that comes the difficult conversations that are layered on to the aspect of understanding your people and how you are directly impacting their results.
Yeah, I'm still coming back to what you said about how like your whole thing is driven by impact. And I think it really does resonate. I mean, I also have family members that do not understand anything about what I do. And so it is very important. I think you hit the nail right on the head there, is by focusing on, this is the part that's important to me, right? So the part that's important to you is the impact on the people around you. And I love when you talked about the terminations that you've had to handle as well, because I feel like that impact on somebody else's life is huge, right? If you're giving somebody else promotion, that's massive. But having to have the opposite conversation with someone is just as impactful, and it's just as weighty. You know what I mean? Like these are conversations that are very important for different reasons, but it really kind of highlights that as a manager, the impact that you are having is, I mean, it's triple what anybody else's impact is, right? Because everybody's working towards that bottom line. We're all trying to like work towards whatever the goal of the team is. But knowing that your efforts are going to impact not just the team, but each individual around you, like that's massive. That's a huge thing to try and like wrap your head around. So I think I very much appreciate that with both of you, you're talking about like kind of your bigger challenges, and it's not really in terms of like how you each adjusted to the job. It was how the people around you adjusted to you then being in management. And honestly, like, I think that kind of speaks to a larger ethos and a larger mindset between like, what you want your manager mindset to be. You want people to go in there thinking like, okay, how am I going to develop the people around me? So I think that, yeah, I mean, like that kind of really points to some very good, very good messaging and very good, development within Samsara, especially to make sure that there are people in management that have these kind of goals. All right. Now, obviously, when we talk about the sales team specifically, high performance as an IC does not always translate to success as a leader. Do you think that there are skills that aspiring sales leaders should focus on developing that are not necessarily something that you would need to remain as an individual contributor within sales? Aliyah, how do you feel about this?
Absolutely. I will just start with a couple. The first is communication. And as salespeople, I think it's natural to feel like I have some pretty strong communication skills. I know how to negotiate. I know how to close deals. I know how to build rapport. That's step one, right? But in communicating as a leader, you have a variety of different conversations that you're going to have. And so when first stepping into the role, I can give positive feedback, no problem. But it's really those more difficult conversations that we began alluding to in our last question around terminations, or what does it look like to coach someone through bereavement or simple feedback from a director that is an observation of the organization. How are you managing up as a leader and being the voice of your team or those that you're supporting? And then also, how are you delivering those messages to reps? I can tell you, I mock just as I would as a sales rep. I do mocks with my director and my peers when I have big conversations like a termination coming up, because as a sales rep, oftentimes if there are legal obligations, they're written in the contract, you have them memorized. But when it comes to people, those legal implications and intricacies are far different, and they are constantly changing from situation to situation. And at a company like Samsara, who's in hyper growth phase, we're changing with the times and with the size of our business as well. So communicating is huge. And then the second piece, which is probably very well known at this point, is emotional intelligence. And it's one thing to be able to mirror the person across from you as you would as a salesperson, but it's another to really pick up on someone's subtleties and read between the lines, as far as not just what it means to be understanding what their gap plan is if they're pacing behind, but really, is this due to business factors that are influencing their workflows? Did we have systems down, tools down, or in today's society, are there conflicts that are going on in the world that are preventing this person from showing up as their best self? So it's important to be conscious and observant so that you can really develop those stronger EQ and build responses that are also productive rather than intrusive in any way.
Well, that was a masterclass right there in how to talk about it. So let's talk. Yeah, seriously, Kristen and I are both just like, okay, I don't know what else I'm going to say around that. No, I can't say anything to that wouldn't be further gilding the lily. Kristen, how do you feel about this? Do you agree? Do you think there are other skills that also should be added to this list that people should try to develop if they are looking towards leadership?
No, I mean, I completely agree. I think communication, I think seeking to understand others is the number one thing that you really have to be much more self-conscious of, because it's not just about you and your number. So I think Aliyah put it perfectly. I think the only other thing that comes to mind is, also with that mindset shift of moving from, just your day to day, is trying to understand the bigger picture from a company standpoint. And so much of a manager's role and in the context of a sales leader is understanding the business initiatives and the why behind it and articulating that why. Because I remember for me, when I was an account executive, like I wanted to know my quota. I wanted to know like the ways I could go about hitting my number and make as much money as I could. And so sometimes when things change in the company that could impact your strategy to go do that, it can be scary, right? Change is scary when, at least for me, when I was in that role. And so as a manager, just making sure you're aligning to those. And it comes down to communication, like Aliyah said, knowing how to communicate those changes effectively is so critical. And you as a leader, just really understanding what's going on and what the business needs and being able to be a great team member for upper leadership and also for the people on your team.
I think that's the key right there, right? Being able, if once you're in leadership, it's not like your allegiance changes, right? You're still in the same program, you're still within the same company, within the same teams. It really is, I think it is something that's important to keep in mind. All right, let's talk about defining leadership. When it comes to the context of sales, how can somebody know if leadership is actually the right path for them? I feel like a lot of times we are focused on climbing the ladder or leveling up. And so that idea of like kind of moving up and getting promoted is important. But this is like being a manager isn't just necessarily another stop on the ladder, right? Like being a manager is something that is very different than being, within the sales team. So what do you think leadership looks like within the context of the sales division? Kristen, you want to go first? Actually, you know what, Aliyah, let's go to you first. What do you think is gosh, I can't even articulate my own questions. How do you think the definition of leadership changes within the context of sales?
Yeah, I will say oftentimes salespeople are very ambitious, and I am here for upward mobility. However, it is very different in the sales realm because, as Kristen mentioned, you have the business strategies. Sometimes we have marketing campaigns that make our jobs a bit easier. And other times we have system changes or processes that are going to make it a lot more difficult. And so at the end of the day, the business is consistently expecting growth from you and your team. And it's important to be able to articulate what that growth looks like to your team and the why behind it. I think most people hate to hear quota is increasing, but being able to articulate well based off of an influx of inbound leads or what have you, this is where these numbers are coming from. It's not thin air, and really helping people to process these changes can be a challenge, but in that's where those skills we were just talking about are vital. And when determining if it's really right for you or not, it's important to understand that why. If it is solely upward mobility, I'm not sure you're gonna really love what you're doing day to day, because between the difficult conversations and just the schedule shift alone, it is very different. I went from selling at LinkedIn and HubSpot where I had 100% control over my agenda. I knew when I can have a lighter day versus a heavier day. I can front load pipeline here so that end of quarter is going to look a little lighter. But as a manager, you are serving your people. So when my director comes to me and says, we actually need to reshift our teams, you need to meet with your peers, organize and understand the challenges you're seeing so that we can reshuffle all within the last 2 weeks of the quarter. It's a little different than what I was used to as an IC. And it comes from the other direction as well. When you have your team coming to you and saying, hey, I need help getting across the line, or I need help with my gap planning, or maybe it's the opposite. I really need you to advocate for me for this promotion I have coming up going into this next quarter, or understanding backfills. There's so much more that fills my day that candidly surprised me. I thought that I would have more time to plan and be strategic as a leader. And it turns out I just have to really double down on time management and protect that time for myself. So it's not something that everyone enjoys. I'll just speak personally. My husband's like, I don't know how you do it. He's in finance behind Excel all day. And so it's very night and day different as far as the day-to-day motions, but also the types of conversations you're having with sales motions, you're closing, right? And we know all the components that go into that. But as a people leader, I have gone from one-on-one where a rep is opening up and very emotional to the point of sobbing because of a personal event. And in that next meeting, no break in between, I'm talking strategy with my director. And then the very next meeting, I'm giving some constructive feedback. So it is a lot of pivoting, and it takes a sense of emotional control as well from an individual.
And
I mean, I think these are great.
Sorry to interrupt, but Aliyah, I can agree with you more. Like, I've seen individual contributors that I respect so much, are so talented, take the step into management because they just feel like, well, that's what I'm supposed to do at this point, right? Like, the opportunity is there. Shouldn't I go do it? And it's the wrong choice for them. They end up going back into it. To me, that's not a wrong choice because you learn from it and you learn more about yourself. But it's such a good call out that you really have to look at yourself and figure out, what aligns with what makes you happy every day. Otherwise, it's going to be way more challenging than the perception of what it is.
No, as I'm listening to you, to both of you talk about this, I'm thinking, yeah, I feel like if we were more clear about what leadership actually means, it does not mean like, well, you get to sit at the top of the table or something. If we're being more clear about what that actually entails, I feel like you're right. It does clarify for people what that shift actually is going to look like, what it's going to entail, what it's going to require from you. And Kristen, to your point, I could not agree more. It's not I don't think it's a wrong choice for people to take these steps, right? Go ahead and take it. The problem I have is when we then say like, oh, well, it was a mistake and you now have to take a step backwards. No, you tried something that you had never tried before. You realized it was not for you. You probably now know a lot of reasons why it's not for you, which may or may not help you to figure out what your next step should be, but it'll probably help you to figure out what your next step shouldn't be. So I think it is really important that we talk about, the practicalities of these changes, because it's not just moving from a workflow at this desk to a workflow at that desk over there. It is going to be a very large change in what your function is. And, Aliyah, to your point, that emotional control necessary to do that. I know plenty of people that could do that, but do they want to? Maybe not. But it is something that just because you have the skills does not necessarily mean this is the way you have to utilize them. So just, putting that out there for people. But absolutely, if this is something that you want to do, then yeah, you should know that here's what's going to change as a result of you taking these steps, or what should change, I should say. All right, let's talk about the goal setting techniques. I want to talk about some of the specific strategies that y'all have used to set effective and measurable goals as sales leaders. Kristen, do you want to start us here?
Sure. I mean, when I think about setting goals as a sales leader, the first thing that comes to mind is this idea of focus, because there's just so many different angles you could take in sales. There's so many different things that are measured that it can be overwhelming. It can feel like, well, where do I start? Like, which spot do I pick on first? And so something that's really helped me when I've thought about this is, in any team I've been managing, I ask myself okay, well, what's the number one thing that if I can impact this will have the greatest influence on our bottom line as a team? And so from there, I've had to force myself to simplify a little framework. Otherwise, by running on the hamster wheel and just spinning your wheels on what you could do, you realize you're not being very productive. So I first try to identify what the problem is. What's the thing that I think is going to have get the most squeeze for us? And from there, I try to influence the behavior. So we got the problem. What's the behavior that needs fixing? And then can I measure it, right? So after we influence the behavior, how can I actually see if what we did worked? And so, I think back to an incredible team that I managed. Shout out to the Cream team if anybody's here, but 9 very talented group of individuals that we are really struggling in our point in the sales process, where from when we presented pricing to actually closing the deals, on average, it was taking us roughly 6 to 7 weeks, which in our segment is way too long. Like we're very behind average. That was like a problem, right? So we identified the problem. We need to go fix this. And as a team, we decided to try to go influence the behaviors. So we came up with a new pricing strategy. We created a new step in the sales process to mitigate a lot of the objections we were getting later stage. Okay. So we're coaching to the problem. We're influencing behaviors. We are all bought in. Everyone's holding each other accountable. We're rooting each other on. And 2 quarters later, we measure the impact, right? And so for us as a team, we were able to reduce our sales cycles by 30%. So we cut that time significantly from our problem area. And anybody in sales knows time kills deals. So if you're able to shrink your sales cycles, not only are you able to go and take more time to go after more deals, but our conversion rates increased. So, a very specific example that happened on our team, but that one problem that we identify by just having that focus and being able to figure out like, what's our game plan to go fix this, paid off dividends for us as a team. And that framework I still use today. I'm using it today with my region of how do I approach it to help just chip away one little problem at a time and try to make, be a little bit better every single day.
I love that approach. And, it really is something that can be endlessly applicable. Like you said, it's a solution model that you utilized then and is still, useful to you now. Aliyah, do you agree with this? Do you think that there were specific ways to set these goals as a leader that were different from when you were just an IC?
I definitely agree. I think that's what is needed from that bird's eye view level that Kristen spoke to. You're no longer working on one book of accounts, driving toward one quota. You have to have that holistic perspective. I will say I am biased, and maybe this is the science background or just the processes that I loved as an IC, but I do still move forward with data throughout. And for me, it's something that just continues to keep me on track. So I tend to have, at least from a personal perspective, a lot more touch points with myself as far as what pacing looks like or what forecasting may be. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I like to see the incremental change. And again, being on a fast-paced team, I need to make sure if things have changed week over week and that's influencing the overall outcome, I have to mitigate it very quickly. So definitely agree with what Kristen says. I think I just would add that I really rely on the data, maybe a little too often, but very often.
As someone who is also very data minded, I completely understand. Data is safety, right? It's certainty, and we love that in in this uncertain world. So very much kindred spirit there. All right, let's talk about self-advocacy. This is difficult at any stage, I think, for anyone, but it is really crucial if you're going to continue growing both personally and professionally. So I want to know how you became, at least maybe a little bit more practiced or more skilled with self-advocacy, and how do you think others should do the same? Kristen, what do you think?
Yeah, I was not good at self-advocacy. I still think I could improve on this because, we can call it what it is. Sometimes it can feel awkward, right? Like that's just the nature of the beast. But I've really tried to change the way I think about self-advocacy. And, as a manager myself, like managers want to know what you're doing, like as often as you want to share it. They want to know all the amazing things that you're doing to contribute to the team especially outside of your day-to-day. And so, I think of it less of, you don't have to think of it as I have to advocate. You can think I'm just going to proactively communicate all the great things that I'm doing, right? That kind of like takes a little bit of the, intimidation out of it, perhaps for some people. But I had a woman on my team that did this so exceptionally well. She was like, Kristen, every single month I'd like to schedule a meeting with you and go over all the things that I'm doing in my role so that I can maximize my potential. It's like, this is incredible. Sounds good. So each month we would meet, and not only would we talk about what she's doing in her day-to-day, but she would highlight all the things she was doing to impact our team, to impact the company. And what she was doing is advocating for herself. And it was incredible because she was doing so many things that deserve so much praise. And I mean, this woman's been promoted numerous times throughout our company. It's so impressive. But that was also just such an amazing example of how to just be proactive and share as much as you possibly can. And, you know, it really comes down to just keeping track of what you're doing, right? If you have an annual review coming up, are you waiting for that annual review to talk about all the things that you're doing in your job? Like, how many times does December roll around? I can't remember what I did 2 days ago, nonetheless in February, right? So, you know, being able to keep track of that, and that's something I started doing, is just keep yourself organized of all the things that you're doing. And if you don't have a proactive monthly check-in with your manager, like this woman on my team did, you know, go set up something.
Schedule one.
Yeah, go do it, right? There's nothing stopping you. And no manager is ever going to say, I'd like to hear less, right? Every manager wants to know more because they want to be able to find out the amazing things so they can share it across their teams as well. So I think just that mindset shift of how to advocate for yourself is, and seeing incredible examples on my teams have really helped shape the way that I think about it.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I mean, I don't think I'm the only person here who feels like if I do tell people stuff about myself, it feels like I'm bragging, right? But like, first off, let's leave that in the past where it belongs. But also, it's not bragging if you actually did it, okay? Like, seriously. And people aren't going to know. They're not going to know because let's be real. Nobody is as concerned with you as you are. And that's okay. I'm not trying to like knock everybody's selfish hustle or anything. No. It's just that I don't know what Aliyah's got going on. I live with my husband, y'all, and I don't know what he does on a day-to-day basis unless I'm like, hey, what did you do today? So truly think of it that way. Okay. If you are even just like existing in the same orbit as someone else, you're going to be like, hey, guess what I did today? It was pretty cool. I got to talk to Kristen and Aliyah. We spent an hour and a half talking about leveling up our careers when it comes to like, you know, individual contributors or being in management. You have to talk about these things, right? Yeah. And it's not we have to ditch the bragging mindset and we have to go with this idea of no one can help you get somewhere if they don't know that you're on a journey at all. Okay. So you have to like, let that be known. You have to talk about where you want to be going. So that way, either people can give you like tips and tricks, or they can say, hey, you don't actually want to go there. It's miserable this time of year. You actually want to wait in 2 years and then apply for a manager role because we'll be restructured. It'll be great. Like these are the kinds of things you got to do, right? You have to be open. You have to keep talking about these things. And so I very much appreciate this repetition from each of you that like, no, you don't get anywhere by being quiet. Okay. You have to keep talking. This is how we do things in the world. All right. We have time for probably one more question. Aliyah, I want to go to you for this one. Building a strong network is absolutely vital. Obviously, you know, nobody gets anywhere within the sales industry as a whole without knowing other people within the field, right? What advice do you have for people who are trying to develop a network map and really leverage connections effectively? What should people know as they're going through and trying to do this for themselves?
Yeah, the first piece is know your story. And the reason why I say know your story is because everything from my grandparents telling me I'm going to be a doctor to my time selling at different companies influences my why and how I show up at work today. So when I'm meeting with new people, I start most conversations, if it's the first one, by asking if it's okay that I just share a bit about myself. And then in return, I want to know about this person as well. And to me, I feel like it allows me to really build a genuine and authentic connection. So the first piece is knowing your story, but the second piece is so that you can build authentic relationships. I will be honest, I look at some of my peers and I'm like, I cannot network like that. I just can't walk up to just anyone all the time and talk about anything. It's
weird. Don't do it. I like, as someone who can do it, it's not for everyone. Okay. It's really weird. I can't balance a checkbook, but I can do this. So yes. Do it your way.
I'm sure I'll see it on your LinkedIn profile, but it's not on mine. So for me, it's so important that I am intentional and build those authentic relationships. And what makes that easier is understanding or doing a little bit of research on who I'm talking to. So is there something in their background, just as I would when prospecting as an IC, is there something in their background, their experience, or interest that we may have in common that I can build on? And that allows me to, of course, build a bridge, but also to just feel a lot more confident going into the conversation. It's not forced and it's not something that is going to be one and done. I really work to be intentional with building my network so that one, I don't have to have so much pressure to advocate for myself, going back to the previous question, but I can really take a collective approach and have a tribe of advocates who know who I am and understand what I will bring to the table. And candidly, I can't think of any job that I've had that I didn't get as a result of someone referring me or someone tapping me on the shoulder and saying, it's time, you need to go for this. So I've been really grateful for that thus far.
I absolutely love that. Kristen, do you approach networking like this? Is this something that you've had to kind of wrap your mind around or find an approach that works for you?
Yeah, I definitely have. And actually listening to Aliyah say it, I will say the first time I met with Aliyah, she literally took this exact approach. Like it was, we worked with each other for quite a bit now. She's so impressive. And like, I will never forget that first meeting with her. I was like, wow, she is so buttoned up. She's done research on me. Like, this is incredible. Like this girl is going places. So like, truly she practices what she preaches. But no, I think what Aliyah said that she hit on is like just networking in a way that feels authentic to you, and not doing it because when you're networking, you want to put your best foot forward and show people who you are. And so you need to do it in a setting that's going to allow you to feel comfortable to do that. Right. And that could be in a room of 100 people walking up to somebody and talking about their dog, or it could be like setting up an intentional one-on-one and like having more of that personal connection with somebody. So I just think like, making sure that you're doing it because, I will say like, even the way that I ended up at Samsara was through multiple networks combining themselves to even stumble upon the opportunity where I am today. And there's so many times I think back to myself, like, what if I didn't maintain that connection? What if I didn't maintain that one relationship? I wouldn't be here today. Right. And so, I just think it's so incredibly important to just find the approach that works for you and just make sure you're doing it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. One of the things that we hear the most often is that networking feels weird, right? Because it feels like you're asking people for something, but you're not actually asking for anything. You're asking to share some of their time, learn how they did something. And so I think that, to both of your points, doing it in a way that feels intentional keeps it from feeling forced. It keeps it from feeling like you're trying to like go get something that you maybe don't even really want or don't really know how to use even. And if you look at it less in terms of what can I get from this other person, because again, personally, that felt really weird for me and it makes me really hesitant to even reach out. But like, think of it less in terms of what you're getting from them and more in terms of what could this connection result in, not just for you. Okay. Like, what could this connection result in for somebody that you might meet 10 years from now, but you knew Aliyah, you met and worked with Aliyah, and they're like, I think Aliyah, the sun shines out of her butt. I'm telling you, she does everything. It's fabulous. I got to know her. And Kristen's like, you know what? I can actually introduce you to Aliyah. Yeah. Because I got you. Totally. I'm telling you, you're building up these things that you can potentially utilize for yourself, but also could potentially utilize for others later. And for me, that is even more of an upshot for me, because then it's like gives me the warm fuzzies, in perpetuity. So I can't agree enough with both of y'all's advice on this. Thank you so much. All right, we have less than 5 minutes left. I just want to say quick thank you to everybody for sticking through with us this long. To both of our panelists, I told you would not believe me when I told you it was going to go this fast, but I'm telling you. The screen in front of you is going to show you some information that we got from Aliyah and Kristen about Samsara. So we asked them some questions ahead of today's event. And one of the things that I absolutely want to talk about is your top tip for someone who's interviewing. So Kristen, I'm going to go to you first on this. Is your top tip, do you think that this is Samsara specific, or do you think that this advice is good no matter where people are interviewing?
I think this is good no matter where you're interviewing. I know this line maybe sounds a little corny, be yourself and let your personality shine. But I think the reason that that stands out to me is because this is a two-way interview. And I think that's really important to call out. Like the manager or whoever's interviewing you is asking you the questions, but you're also asking them the questions and interviewing them just as much. And, at the end of the day, there's two people trying to get to know each other to figure out if this is going to be a fit for both of you. And so I think just showing up authentically and showing yourself and showing your personality and what you want to get out of your next role is so important. And don't try to be something that you're not. Don't try to be too rigid or what you think the person across from you wants to hear. Be yourself. And if it's not the right fit, that's okay. It's okay for both of you. Right. And so I just think it's a really important thing to keep in mind as you go through interviewing in general.
Yes. I mean, truly, y'all, I do this for a living. It is palpable. You can tell when someone's like, yeah, and I'm like really team oriented and I'm great at multitasking. Oh my God, so good. And I really, really love changing topics 8 times a second. And I'm just really good at it. I'm great. It's the best. You can tell. All right. So when you are trying to go in and let your personality shine, we're not just saying it, like be you, because it's really easy to tell when you're not. Really. Aliyah, how about you? What do you think is important about communicating that impact?
Yeah, I feel like this goes back to self-advocacy. We do so many cool things. And by cool, I mean things that are innovative and that are really making a difference. But many times, myself included, we don't always circle back to what resulted from that and how that really made a difference for an individual, for a group of people, an organization. And so when interviewing, it's so important to, yes, highlight the inputs that have made you successful, but really bring it full circle and speak to that latter half, which is what was success? What made it so successful? Quota attainment's awesome. I can read 200% attainment, and I know that means you are great at your job, but tell me that whole story and tell me why that was important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. In the last couple minutes that we've got here, I want to ask one question, and apologies, I didn't prep you all for this, but it's one of my favorite questions to ask. Okay. What is the thing that keeps you at Samsara? That you're like, I'm not going to find this if I go anyplace else, so I'm sticking because blah, blah, blah. Like Taco Tuesdays in the lunchroom, your sick parking spot right out front under that shady tree. What is the thing that you're like, okay, but here, this is why I love this company. This is why I'm here. Kristen, what about you?
Hands down, I mean, it's the people. I think it's our secret sauce. I think it's the thing that when you look at the tenure of our company, we've had some people, we just had a leadership offsite last week. The tenure on the table was, average 5-6 years. Like, it's just incredible. And I think people really appreciate working with people that care about them, that want to help each other. And, it goes back to the culture that we set, but from our top leaders, our CEO Sanjit, all the way, down to, like where I sit, I just think they've done an incredible job of focusing on the people. And that's why people stay.
Aliyah, what do you think?
+1. And I will also just add the culture, yes, but also the growth potential. I think the pace of the business and the new markets that we're tapping into is definitely influenced by the culture. It's really bi-directional. And with growth potential comes one opportunity to really create systems and processes and get your hands dirty so you can try many things, even if you're carrying one job title, which I have found really helps me to fill multiple cups when it comes to getting a sense of fulfillment as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to both of you. This has been a really amazing conversation. And honestly, none of the stuff that I've heard today about Samsara really surprises me, but it's all stuff that I've come to expect just because I know what we're going to get when we talk to Samsara team members, right? We're going to hear from somebody who cares about what they're doing, cares about the people that they're doing it with, and cares about the way it's being done. So I think that it's been absolutely wonderful to get to talk to both of you, Aliyah and Kristen. I'm just really, really honored to have gotten to share the stage with you today, and very, very, very thankful to have gotten to learn from you today. So thank you to both of you for taking that time and sharing your expertise with us today as well.
Likewise, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, y'all. If anything that we have said today has sparked you or made you more interested in Samsara, I really encourage you to check out their company page. I shared a link on our on the chat there where you can check them out. I also encourage you to check out their follow network. It's a big pink button that says follow. Clicking that does some great things for you, but basically what it does is it tells Samsara that you're interested in working with them even before you fill out an application. And it allows Power to Fly to take some of the weight off of your job search, because we will tell you when Samsara posts new roles. So very much recommend that if you are interested, you check out their page, apply to some roles. Definitely smash that follow button to make sure that you have the best option to get in at this great company. And if this was your first Power to Fly event, I very much hope this will not be your last. If this was your 100th with us, we cannot wait until we see you again soon. I hope you all have a safe, happy, healthy rest of your day, week, and weekend, and cannot wait to see y'all back here on another Power to Fly event soon. Bye, y'all.